My name is Waylon Lewis, and I'm honored to be here with David Richo. Welcome, David.
Thanks for inviting me, Waylon.
Yeah, I'm very excited about this one because I've been reading your book, and it's darn good. It's sold hundreds and hundreds of thousands of copies over the years. So, like the famous Elvis album, 500,000 people can't be completely wrong. Your book is really helpful. So just maybe, can you just tell me and us, the elephant community, kind of how did you come to write this book?
I came to write this book based on my realization that the only models I had for what a relationship could look like were my parents and movies. And I wondered if there was an actual skill that one could learn so that a relationship could work better than we see in our parents and in movies.
Right.
So I've been a therapist for over 50 years and worked with thousands of clients. And I basically learned from them and from my own experience, and then finally, and so importantly, from Buddhism, how loving kindness could be shown in a relationship and how communication could happen effectively and how you could both let go of your ego and at the same time feel like you still are an individual, that you haven't given up yourself in order to be in a relationship. Relationship works best when both people come forward as who they are, while at the same time acting in a collegial way instead of one is in charge.
Yeah, that's a profound statement that the way you deliver it, it almost goes under the guise of sounding like it makes sense and it's ordinary and we've heard it before. But that is, so many movies, like you said, Jerry Maguire, You Complete Me. The culture we've been brought up in is that with love songs, I also think are a big influence, is that I am nothing. I am just a big ball of empty longing for this perfect princess or prince. And then I find that, and then everything's perfect, happily ever after, it's over. And then we get in the relationship and suddenly the prince or princess is like arguing with us about dishes and they want to put up a horrendously ugly painting on the wall. So how do you...
Bulldogs playing poker.
What's that?
Bulldogs playing poker.
Yes, exactly. And I feel like so much of that is solved or eased, to use a more Buddhist word, by knowing that we're still separate individuals. There's space in between us for loneliness and individuality and humor and passion and communication. But you go into that in depth. And I found that really helpful. I'm 48 now and I was engaged last year. I'm not engaged this year, just to give you a basic, this is where I'm at. And, I very much want to have children. And so I almost feel like biological clockwise for a man, I'm in this place where I do feel like happiness is out there. So reading your book has been really grounding and a good reminder that we can't just guess at this stuff, that we actually need to study and learn like any vocation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's a skill like so many others. Being healthy in a relationship, it's something you can learn how to do.
Yeah.
And I would say, I would even go so far as to say, just coming into a relationship because you're in love and you're in the hormonal high romance phase would not be enough to ensure that your relationship will really work. So I've been thinking of relationships overall as happening in three phases. The first one is romance. It's perfectly wonderful and legitimate, and we're going to enjoy that as long as we can. And it then gradually changes when conflicts start arising. That brings us into our second phase, which is conflict. And there we would need the skill of how to address the issues that come up in an ego-less way, how to process what comes up by being willing to show one's feelings about what's happening, and to connect what's happening to things that happened in childhood that this reminds you of. Mm-hmm. Another one of my books is called When the Past is Present. Mm-hmm. Title says it all. I'm a believer that you're working out things that you never worked out with your own parents, but even by the choice of a partner, you will choose somebody who helps you locate the unfinished business of childhood. So part of the processing is looking into that and being able to admit that that's what's happening. And then third would be the third phase of a relationship is the actual commitment. And the commitment is not just that I'm going to stay put here in the relationship. It's I'm going to keep the agreements, the ground rules of the relationship, and I'm going to show up and be present when issues come up, and I'm going to work on addressing, processing, and resolving them. And that's the point at which marriage makes the most sense. Our parents may have married during the romance phase, so they didn't know what it was like when the conflict started arising. And it's better to see how you do with each other when struggles, problems, issues, difficulties come up. And as you realize, oh, I'm with somebody who's in with both feet on working things out. Mm-hmm. That's important information to have so that you get to the true commitment.
Yeah, I often fantasize about, because I'm going on dates again, and like there needs to be some conflict test that you could do, not on your first date, but maybe on your, 5th date, your 10th date, before things even get into that love phase, really, where you can just see, because on dates, we're putting our best foot forward. We're entering into that hormonal love thing, but it's still months, if not a year ahead before we know how we handle, if we handle disagreement, conflict, and the process and the resolution, if we're both committed to that.
Waylon, I'm glad you brought that up, because before you start the 3 phases, hopefully there's another phase, which I call investigation. And that's what you're describing. Let's see how we work things out together. To start with, I'm head over heels in love, and all my hormones are racing and juicing me up. Yeah. And maybe shutting down my normal thinking processes.
Right, your discerning mind.
Yeah, we want to find out what kind of a person is this? How does this work with who I am? How do our personalities either scrape against each other or smoothly move along with each other? Mm-hmm. You also need to know, is this the kind of a person who wants this kind of a relationship? we're walking together in the world side by side and we're joined? Or does this person want this kind of a relationship? We're looking at each other constantly and we want to be with each other every minute and we're clinging to each other.
Mhm.
Either one is okay, but problems arise when it looks like this. One
Mhm.
person wants to look straight ahead into the world like this, and the other person demands this.
Right.
Then there'll be conflict. So that's the kind of thing you're going to be looking into. Is this the kind of a person that fits with my level of being an introvert or an extrovert?
Right.
Like if I need a lot of time alone, can this person handle that? Or will this person always want to be bringing me to parties?
Right.
These are all such important questions that we didn't think to ask ourselves before, but I'm hoping that more and more people would do it like this, because then there'll be fewer failed marriages. The other part of this, as you know from the book, is I came up with 5 specific ways that love can be shown. And part of the investigation is to find out if the person that you're with is able to fulfill these 5 human needs.
And you call these the 5 A's.
Call these the 5 A's because they all happen to begin with A.
Yeah.
Now, these are the original needs we came into the world with. So when we were infants, we needed, first of all, attentiveness from our parents. They, since we didn't have words, they needed to figure out when we cried, did it mean we needed to be fed or changed or held? And when we noticed that 24/7 somebody was available and somebody was usually working out what we needed, then we came to trust that humans can fulfill us.
Mhm.
That's such an important realization.
Mhm.
Then when we started to show, and part of that would be affection, we noticed that we were held and we were hugged and kissed. Now we know that the brain actually requires holding and loving embraces in order to develop well.
Mhm.
Then when we showed that our specific personality, did they accept us as we really are? So that's our 3rd A, acceptance. And then did they value us, or were we just a burden? Did they see us as wonderful gifts that they received from the universe? And did they cherish us in a way that made us believe that we were important and good and there's nothing to be ashamed of in presenting ourselves as we are? And then finally, the 5th and final A is so important to the developmental task of branching out on your own. That would be allowing, that they could fully allow you to start and continue all through the lifespan becoming more independent. So when you crawled across the room, that was okay with them. They didn't have to pick you up and carry you across.
Right.
When it was time to go to school, they gladly brought you there and helped you get used to it. And when it came time to leave home altogether to go to college or whatever was coming next, they were okay with that too.
That
So
one's
those
so
5
powerful.
A's, yeah,
That one's so powerful because in a way, the final one, which is so key, almost contradicts some of the others. Like you're willing to let go, and that's the ultimate trust, the ultimate relaxation
Yes.
of the parent or
Yeah,
the
all
child.
5 of them together are the ways of showing love.
Mm.
So it's attention, affection shown physically, non-sexually in childhood, acceptance, appreciation, and allowing. And those are the very same 5 needs that we're looking for from a partner.
Mm.
So nature did not set it up so that we have a whole new set of needs. It's the same needs all through the lifespan. And they're supposed to come from ourselves to ourselves. I pay attention to myself, I accept myself, and so forth. And from our parents, and then from a partner.
Oh, so powerful.
Yeah. And
Your parents teach you how to relate to yourself in those ways.
Yes, your parents, when they showed you these 5 A's,
Right.
were teaching you how to show them to yourself, and then how to show them to others.
Mm.
And so when you finally did meet someone as a prospective partner, you weren't trying to get those 5 needs met 100% of the time by this new partner. You had already learned how to give them to yourself. You had already received so much of them from your parents. And you also now have a circle of friends who also give these to you. Mm-hmm. That's what a friend does, give you these same 5 A's. So it all comes together and feels just right. Now, if your parents didn't come through with one or more of these A's, you might notice that you have a problem. And the problem is that when these wonderful need fulfillments come to us, they not only give us what they promise, they also endow us with the capacity to be satisfied with a moderate amount. So when we received it 100% attention in infancy, that equipped us, even though this sounds paradoxical, I guess it is paradoxical. When you get 100% at the beginning, or even good enough, mm-hmm. you also get the capacity to be satisfied with less for the rest of your life. Mm. So you won't be craving attention from your partner because you come in with the ability to be satisfied with the moderate dose that any adult would want. A healthy adult only wants moderate attention, not constant attention.
Right. And that comes back again
does this make sense?
Yeah, that comes back again to what you were saying, like the parents' love teaches us how to take care of ourselves.
Yeah.
And if I take care of myself, then on some level I'm independent from codependency. So I'm not looking to fill a vacuum.
Exactly. In other words, well, you're reminding me of a quote by Henry David Thoreau.
Ooh.
I think it's in a journal. It may not be in Walden, but here's what he says, and this summarizes it very well. Alms house means a house for poor people.
Yeah.
I will come to you, my love, when I no longer need you. Then you will find not an alms house, but a palace. Mm. In other words, if you come in with neediness to get those 5 A's from somebody, you're coming in uh, like someone who is terribly deficient, and the other person will notice this and will be turned, if he or she is healthy or they are healthy, they'll be turned off by this.
Yeah. You
They
have a
don't want
chapter.
someone that's going to hang on them and have to be constantly fulfilled. They want somebody who has some independence and who's getting need fulfillment from within his
Yeah.
own self.
Yeah, that's so paradoxical because I, of course, pretty much skipped to the chapter and then started over in your book about, finding your partner, how to find someone. And I love that you began. It's very Buddhist, and I didn't even realize you practiced or studied Buddhism, but you talk about longing and how it's okay to feel longing or that kind of emptiness or sadness or loneliness, or longing can be fun and romantic too. But is that feeling is okay as long as you're aware of it. Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah, and you're gladly admitting it
Yeah.
to yourself and to the prospective partner.
Yeah.
Another part of this would be the realization that this can only work if you're present as someone who wants to let go of that natural impulse that we all have to uh, puff up our ego.
Mm.
The relationship will only work when I dispossess myself of that big ego, arrogant entitlement, dispossess myself of that in order to gratify the needs of the relationship.
Mm.
That's different from the other doing it the other way. I'm here to gratify my ego. I'm here to be right. I'm here to be on top. I'm here to be acknowledged as the big shot.
Mm.
And as long as you're still trying to do that, as long as you still haven't gotten to the point in life when you realize nobody loves that kind of an ego. Only unhealthy people want to be around that.
Mm.
So I'm automatically putting out an energy in the world when I come across with that big ego that brings in the unhealthy candidates. And I have a whole chapter on this topic of, how do you recognize your ego and work with it? What we want is the healthy ego,
Yeah.
which is not puffed up, which is normal adult size,
Yeah.
and is willing to admit being wrong, and is willing to apologize when necessary, and is capable of forgiving rather than retaliating.
Mm.
You have to ask yourself, am I that kind of a person?
Mm.
Because if you're not, it's a setup for disaster, for nothing but drama and abuse between you and whoever the partner is.
And even before that, I love that you're saying like what you think you want, what you think you need or want. On some level, you're going to get it. Like, but it may not be a healthy thing that you get. If you're looking for, someone to respect and communicate with, and neither party will be perfect, but you'll try to get through confusion in a good way, you might get that. If you're looking for someone just physically who seems perfect, who fulfills your ego, you might get that, but you're not going to get what you fundamentally need or want, right?
Exactly.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's a good point. You want to distinguish between your healthy needs and your unhealthy needs. And the way to distinguish is very simple. The unhealthy needs are the ones that can't be fulfilled because you keep wanting more and more, and you can never get enough. And as Shakespeare says, by what I most enjoy, contented least. In other words, you don't get contentment
Whew.
even though you keep thinking you're fulfilling the need. That's different from the healthy need, which is I'm willing to be vulnerable enough to say that I want to be held right now.
Yeah.
And I understand if you're not into it at the moment and hope it can happen soon. And I'm not going to be clinging to you. Just want to get a sense of togetherness, in a physical way. And it doesn't have to lead to sex. That's what you sound like when you're making a bid for a healthy connection and you don't have a strategy in mind that will maybe try to take advantage of the other person or try to use the other person to fulfill things that we're supposed to be working on from within ourselves and among our wider support system. What is this support system? Our friends, our family, our workmates, nature, our spiritual practice. In fact, one of the main points of the book is relationships work best when both people are engaging in a practice, such as the practice of loving kindness in Buddhism, which is, of course, as you know, oriented toward not only do I ask for happiness for myself, but also for everyone else. Mm-hmm. So you come right in with a bigness of heart instead of neediness.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
You're going to look so different when you come in that way.
Yeah, the Maitri or the Metta or the loving kindness for me seems like that whole second phase where the parents teach you the 5 A's and then you kind of begin to do that for yourself, and that's Maitri or loving kindness. And then you're kind of invincible in this incredibly soft, vulnerable, imperfect way, and that you have those 5 A's in your own recipe.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And you just reminded me of a quote from the Tao. From when I love unconditionally, I am invincible. See, to make that connection, that being a full-on strong human in the world who is not at the mercy of all the bids that society is making to turn us into consumers or sheep, that the way I get to that kind of strength is through love, not through building aggressive muscle.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is very much this is an art of true love is an art of nonviolence.
Yeah.
I try to think of how would I describe love, and I've come up with this. I'll be interested in how you see it. That love is so I'm going to have 3 C's and 5 A's. Love is a caring, committed connection shown by attention, affection, acceptance, appreciation, and allowing. Allowing instead of controlling, accepting instead of rejecting. That's how they differ. So anyway, when you think of love that way, it's a caring. We care about each other just as we care about ourselves. You have become as your happiness and freedom has become as important as mine. I'm committed, which means I keep agreements and I can be relied on to be trustworthy. and I work things out when problems come up.
Mhm.
And our connection remains even when I'm angry at you, or even when you're not in a position to fulfill my needs.
Mm.
It can't be that way permanently, but every once in a while in any relationship,
Yeah.
you're going through something, you might be depressed, you might be in a slump, and you're just not coming through as the other person expects you to. If it's a true connection that matters, then those episodes will no longer weigh in to have you think, I need to get out of here.
Yeah.
You'll
That's true.
you'll you'll sit through thick and thin
Yeah.
together. Not put up with abuse, but
Right.
be willing to stay present even when the needs aren't being met, and vice versa. And then
Yeah.
the way that it's shown is in those 5 ways. Those
Yeah.
five ways are how the caring, committed connection is expressed.
Mm.
That's my main theory.
Mm. I think it's a pretty grounded theory, grounded in reality.
Thank you. Yeah, it
Yeah.
took many years to work this out.
Well,
I started writing the book in 2001,
mm,
and then and of course now it's all these years later, and then I rewrote it, which is the version you have.
yeah.
I rewrote it just a couple of years ago to bring it up to date with all the modern things that are happening.
Yeah. With
And
Hinge and Tinder and whatever else.
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm
Yeah.
glad it's helping people.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you maybe two sort of personal questions, because I feel like those are often the most grounded and everyone can relate to them. And then we can let you go.
Sure.
But one of them is, I think, out of some sense of blind privilege and arrogance, which is a very self-critical way of saying, I had a great mom growing up. I've heard all this stuff about the past and parenting and how it influences us. And I've always felt quite independent. She gave that to me, right? Now that I listen to your structure, she let go really powerfully and imbued me with communication and self-acceptance and encouragement. So reading your book throughout the whole thing, I kept thinking about my mom. And it was one of the first times I've ever really seen what has been right there, which is so obvious, which is, wow, I had a really loving, encouraging mom, and she left me with very few gaps or real problematic issues in terms of her parenting. I'm sure I've come up with some problems on my own, but that's just an acknowledgement to say she was far from perfect, but she was really loving. So I guess the question here is, like, for the parents who are listening and reading your book, it feels like a lot of pressure to get everything right with the baby or the child. So is it okay to be wildly and consistently imperfect if you're basically adhering to those 5 A's with your child?
Well, it's the only way it can happen since we're all humans.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
mean, it's not going to happen that way on the TV sitcoms about families. You know, they look so perfect.
Yeah.
But all we need is good enough.
Yes.
Or another way of putting it, I did come up with another way of putting it. It's good enough most of the time.
Mm.
That's all we need.
I
It
love
doesn't
that.
have to be perfect all the time. It's good enough most of the time.
Mm. I
And
love that, Dave.
nobody should be expected to give more than that.
I love that. I feel like that's such a pressure valve release, because when you read the book, I started being like, wow, it's so important in a good way to give these 5 A's. I really don't want to get that wrong if I get to be a father. But at the same time, obviously, it doesn't do us any good to try to be perfect. The second question would be, in my last relationship, you know, I feel like where we failed together, and we had a lot of love, we had a lot of values, we had a lot of respect. There was no like gross problems, other than, for me, and I'll just speak for myself, communication and like kind of getting through difficult things. We had very different styles, you know, neither one better or worse particularly, but I'm a talker and a communicator, and I want to get through things relatively quickly. Not in a rush, but I mean, I don't want to wait a week or two. And she was a processor. She liked to digest and sit on things and kind of be with herself often if there was conflict, and then relate to it later. So is that a little bit of, how did you do that? Like someone's facing forward and someone's facing in? Is that a little bit of just a style
of that? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess what you would have to do there is find a meeting of minds, find a way of working on things that somehow meets you both in the middle.
Mhm.
I'm a big fan of self-disclosure in the relationship. For instance, what you just said, did you ever actually say that to her? You said it.
I mean,
You said, I do it this way, you do it that way.
for sure.
Okay. So,
and we also went to counseling, couples counseling together. So we were able to surface a lot of the issues, as well as a lot of love and a lot of things that were healthy, but we didn't seem to be able to, I guess this is the corollary question here, is at a certain point, I was still trying and like kind of almost like, what do you call it? Like when you're flooding the car, you know, it's not working, but you're trying to start the car. And then I felt like started withdrawing. You know, we had our different styles. I was trying harder and harder, but ineffectually. And she started giving up, I think, on some level.
well, that helps you understand why it couldn't quite succeed, because both people would have to be in with both feet.
Right. Yeah.
When it comes to working things out.
And to give her credit, I think, you know, we both had these different styles where I was maybe a little more communicative and she was a little more contemplative, you could call it. But yeah, we weren't able to sort of find that happy medium or that meeting place for different styles.
Yeah, where you could meet.
Yeah. And I guess the third part of that question, just to exploit, you know, I said 2 final questions. Now I'm on like number 4, but would be, how do you, and we kind of touched on this in the beginning, so it's a good wrap up moment, is how do you surface those kind of basic, perhaps obstacles or incompatibilities earlier? Because I think that's been part of what's been devastating for me losing this relationship is, you know, I created Elephant. I've been super busy. I finally have time for family. And then it took us 3 years to get to that point, to understand that it wasn't maybe going to work. How do you surface it earlier?
Continual, what I call State of the Union meetings. Let's,
Yeah.
you know, let's talk about where we're at, what's going on with us in the realm of how we communicate, how our needs are met or not met, what's happening in the bedroom, how is any of this a carryover from either one of our childhoods. You're constantly having these check-ins in which you're disclosing something about yourself and opening to what the other person has to offer. And the key to doing this is in what you said, which is it's neither right nor wrong. It isn't wrong to be contemplative and take time to make decisions. And it isn't wrong to be the one who wants to do it with expeditiousness, get it done as soon as I can. It's just a matter of, is it so deeply a given for both of us that we can't meet in the middle? Then we're not going to make it as a couple.
Right.
But if we can find a way, I give a little from my side, you give a little from your side, then it can work. What does work mean? What does its working mean? Its working means we're getting our needs met in a good enough way most of the time. The very same criterion we had in childhood.
I love that. Dave, thank you so much. We might have frozen there. Thank you so much for this book. And thank you. In person is, you're the same thing. We call this Walk the Talk Show. So it's nice when someone kind of walks their talk. It's not just a great scholastic book or something, that you're actually embodying it and comfortable and you enjoy communicating it. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad I could do it.